Welcome to Free the Mind, Free the People, a podcast where we come together to empower each other through knowledge and discuss the issues that shape our everyday lives. All opinions and information shared in this podcast are held by the host alone and do not represent the stances of the University of Central Florida and the Department of Sociology.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marina, and I'm one of the hosts for the Free the Mind, Free the People podcast. And I am a second-year sociology master's student at the University of Central Florida.
Hi, everyone. I'm Halley Spencer. I'm the other host of Free the Mind, Free the People, and I'm also a second-year master's student in applied sociology at the University of Central Florida.
So today, as you may or may not know, we've taken a break between our first few episodes, which we decided to call Chapter 1. And now we're going into Chapter 2. And so I just want to give a brief explanation of what Chapter 2 is meant to be. And so our main goal with Chapter 2 is to provide tools and theories that will help us apply sociology to our daily lives and the issues that are affecting us every day and how to address those issues with sociology.
And Chapter 1, we really encourage you to go back and listen to again, or if you haven't listened to it, go back and see what we were discussing, because it basically introduced sociology, and we wanted to use it as a foundation for our Chapter 2. So make sure, if you're interested, go back and listen to our intellectual activism episode, which discussed the war on education, our critical race theory episode, because all of those will be extremely important to everything we'll be discussing moving forward. But with that being said, there's been a lot going on since we last filmed an episode. Marina, I just wanted to check in and see what's been going on with you this summer.
Yeah, so, and as everyone in the audience, the listeners will note, we're going to be a lot more casual in this conversation. We're going to be, so as Halley mentioned, we just want to check in and talk about everything that's been going on over the summer. So I've been doing okay. I think that I've been really frustrated, as many of us have been, but I've also put my energy towards doing something about the things that I'm seeing and just feeling like I'm actually involved and being a part of hopefully a change. So that's what I've been trying to do. How about you?
Yeah, so I've been feeling the same way. It's just that as academics and for anyone who's listening who cares about social issues, we wanted to kind of slate this episode as a way to just vent about, what is it like really going through the feelings of social issues going on? Because we're not robots, we are affected by it. And the summer was just there was a lot going on. It seemed like it was just one after the other. And at that point, it can get really frustrating because you don't know what to do. You're like, wow, one person can't physically bear the weight of all the stuff that's coming up every other day. And so you become more sheltered. You start to think that maybe you can't do anything about it. And that can be really scary when, for such a long time, this is something you felt a lot of passion for, and all of a sudden you feel super depressed about it. And so this episode kind of shows you how we as sociologists move through those feelings of being frustrated and feeling burnt out and feeling like we can't make a change, into being like, oh my gosh, there's a lot going on, but that means there's a lot of work for us to do and we're ready to do it. And so that's why we wanted to talk through all this, because, we're feeling all the feelings right now and over the summer. And so we just needed a chance to discuss that. But I mean, some of the issues that annoyed me personally, that were most frustrating to me, was this overwhelming feeling of false promises, which I know people have felt for a long time, but it felt like it really came to the surface with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. It was frustrating because when all of these new judges were in front of Congress being asked questions about their position on the Supreme Court, they would say that Roe v. Wade would not be overturned because it's an important structure and an important constitutional right. And then we find out that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned. And that's frustrating. And there's also a lack of intersectionality in their understanding of abortion rights, which is frustrating too. So it feels like they're overturning something that they don't quite understand. And the whole discussion around abortion rights lacks intersectionality, which is something we'll be going into in another episode. But that idea of false promises also frustrated me in the Robb Elementary School mass shooting because, we're told that police need all of their weapons to protect us, like that's their job. And when something like this happens, it takes 60 minutes for police officers to stop the problem. So it's like, why?
Mm-hmm.
What was all of that for if not? It obviously isn't for us, that's what it feels like. And there's been distrust for a long time, but it also just felt like it's just mounting even more. And it feels like it's all connected to money and power and politics and this idea of the state not quite understanding what it means to be like a citizen in this country.
Yeah. And I think that we are forgiving. We're very forgiving in that we're saying it feels like, but it is.
Yeah.
We know that it is. It has to do, there's money behind it. I mean, there's a whole reason why the Supreme Court case, the Citizens United, like that's been a topic in the past, but
yeah,
it's not talked about among Democrats or Republicans because obviously in a capitalist system, the corporations are what's ruling and what has power, real power in the political process and everything that goes into that. And obviously we have the NRA, which we'll also be talking about more later in another episode, not today. But yeah, no, and I agree. I feel the same sense of frustration. Yeah, I feel the same sense of frustration, and that I don't know. I don't even know I'm disappointed. I don't think I'm disappointed. I think I expected this, and we've made a point before, like people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, immigrants of color, like we have known.
Yeah,
we've known what this state does to people they don't care about. And so these are topics that we know that the system, either it's broken, some people call it broken, some people say it's working as it's what was meant to be. Yeah, I think that all of that is true at the same time, and that we are seeing some cracks, I guess, or like I would say it's a crack in people's consciousness. Like people are, many people, like the general public, people that previously have been well within the system are starting to realize these things. And so, yeah, so that's what we've seen in the past few years, just like more of that awareness. Because whenever these peaks of whatever injustice, if we want to call it that, it's always injustice, inequality. Yeah, so when we see these peaks, people's awareness, you can't hide it. And especially now, like with social media and everything, it's impossible to hide these things like we did in the past. And that's why the response to this awareness from that same state that we're talking about is so strong, and we see it in different ways. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but
yeah, I think it's interesting that you said that, like, I agree with the thing that, like, the idea that, the system was created this way, especially for people of color. And so it's like, we're seeing cracks in the system, but it's not really like the system has changed at all. It's just that, people who have benefited from the system for a long time are now realizing that maybe they aren't benefiting anymore. And that's what's making them more aware. And what also scares me is that we discussed this a little bit personally, but, we become aware of it and we care about it. And then all of a sudden something else happens. And then we care about that and we're of it. And we forget about everything else that happened in the past. And so when I was looking up a week ago, like, what happened in the summer of 2022? The amount of things that I forgot about or that were the center of the news and then were completely like forgotten about is insane. And I feel like we just like, as people, have trouble, or we can't think about all the bad things that are going on because we would just be like so depressed all the time. but
Yeah.
there's also privilege in being able to forget some of the issues that are going on. Like, people are living these everyday experiences, but some of us have, like, I have the privilege of forgetting that this major news story broke 2 months ago. So you have to balance the idea of, like, you know, you want to be able to, like, continue throughout your day, be able to sit at work and, like, not worry about everything, but also you have to remember there's privilege in being able to forget some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and I would attribute that to the media and how it works. It's information overload. You know, social media is saturated with infographics, which I love. It's fine. I like them. Okay, I like them. But sometimes, you know, if you have all of this, it like on your screen, and you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, like, you just spiral.
Doom
And
scrolling.
yeah, and it's actually, I don't know much about this topic, so I will not say much, but I do know that some people are doing some research on how social media and the algorithm and how all of it actually changes the way that we think. Like, it changes the way that our brain works, and how it actually disarms us in a way. It takes away some of the power or energy that we have. It also disconnects us from each other, where we need to come together. And I don't just mean in the whole, like, it's okay what you believe, you know, let's all come together. No, I mean more in the physical sense. like actually serving our communities and being feeling like we know each other, because that's needed to address these changes or these issues and to create social change. So anyways, I know that we will be talking about media more in another episode, and I'm very excited for that episode. We won't say much anymore. But yes, the media definitely, it's going back to the power and money. All of that is connected. The media is that. So
the media is, like, one of my research topics because I find it so fascinating. But that reminds me of a conversation we had in chapter 1 in our, I think it was our intellectual activism episode, where we talked about, like, the false power we get at, like, tweeting at the president. Like, is that actually going to make a difference? Like, if we spend the amount of time, like, hate tweeting at politicians instead of, like, and we turn that instead into, like, meeting with people and discussing and organizing, like, there could be a big difference in how things are moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess just going into the issues that I have been paying attention to the most, and doom scrolling about. Well, the war on education, as we, again, plugging one of our previous episodes, which was the intellectual activism one, we call it the war on education. And basically that's all the legislation that has been passed regarding, like, limits on education. So, like, critical race theory, which is actually not being taught in public schools, but that's what is being used as a guise to actually talk about race and real history. But anyway, in Florida here, the Stop Woke Act is one of the laws that takes on that, and anti-trans legislation, anti-LGBTQ plus sex ed education. So that's what we've called the Don't Say Gay bill or law now. So yeah, so those are all of things that have contributed to this war, what we call the war on education. And for me, obviously, there's two things. So I am an academic, as we know, in case you didn't know. I'm an academic, and I want to continue in academia. That's what I like. I know that I am the place where I need to be. And it's just really frustrating that there's this attack on us, on educators, not just in, like, college level, but all the way through, like, K through 12. And it's the people that are behind this attack are the same people that are, you know, what the issues that you've mentioned, like Roe v. Wade, gun control, like all of these things are connected. And specifically, even though we've already established that the whole system is contributing to this, there is a very clear group of people that are imposing these laws and fighting for this, or fighting against, or in this battle against classrooms and teachers and books and knowledge. And so my research interests are predominantly in Christian nationalism, and that does come from my experience, as I mentioned before, in a conservative Christian community. And I witnessed a lot of the rhetoric or the ideas that are behind Christian nationalism. And to define that for the listeners, so Christian nationalism, putting it simply, is the belief that the US is a Christian nation and that it should enforce Christian, specifically conservative Christian values through the law. And so the people, you don't need to be a Christian to adhere to this or to support this. Many Republicans, it's specifically Republicans who are, spoiler alert, it's specifically Republicans who are adhering or adopting this idea, but really many of them are not actually practicing Christians or religious even. It's really just a tool at this point. It's just a way to get people that really believe in this, get them on their side. And it's not that difficult when it's conservatism. Like, it's preserving the status quo and preserving basically going back to a previous great nation that has never existed, but it's a myth that is real to them. So in my research with Christian nationalism, this war on education becomes really relevant because it's about control, it's about power, it's about them taking over the only spaces in which you can question anything. So like, obviously academia, schools, which I find ironic, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole now, but I will just say I just find it ironic because they are the same people that created private schools when schools were being integrated, so they didn't want to be integrated, so they made themselves private schools under religious institution. You can't control them with the state because it's religion, it's church, separation of church and state. And now here we are, they are trying to control what's being taught in schools and universities, based on a very clear set of values, which are theirs only. And so that's what we call authoritarianism, pretty much. It really, that just comes out of what you mentioned before, like the people that have previously been privileged or continue to be privileged, but people that have previously not realized how the system didn't work, now they're realizing that it doesn't work for them either in certain ways. But anyways, there's this reaction that comes out of that uncertainty and that fear. And obviously social change, actually, that's like the major driving force. It's not even that they feel like the state is hurting them, but it's that the state is forsaking them for other groups that they've always forsaken.
I think it's really interesting because I like the silver lining to it in my eye, if there were to be one, is the fact that like the people who created these bills are scared. Like, they're scared that we are making progress and they don't want that to happen. So I think it only goes to show that the work that activists have been doing for many years is working because they're frightened and they don't want it to see it progress any further. And so while it's extremely frustrating and it's scary because we both want to be in academia, it's just like, it's because activists for a long time have done such a good job making sure that there is social progress. But, now that they see it, it's kind of like the pendulum swinging, which always happens is once the pendulum is moving this way, some force has to happen to move it back the other way. And so that's what we're seeing again. And it goes back and forth over the course of history. And so it's just they're scared of equality and they're scared of people. They're scared of losing their power. And so they feel like they must force it onto us. And so that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. And well, power and progress, both things. So we have misconceptions about both. Like we think, oh, they want to take power. No, they've been in power. They want to keep their power as soon as they're challenged in any way. So they're actually, we might question like, so how did they get up there? That's weird. Why don't we get up? Like shouldn't it be easy for us to get in power too? And it's like, no. It's easy for them because literally they built the system. So
they've always had it.
Yeah, they've always had power. So obviously it takes little effort on their part to take that power and use it and basically double down. We're talking about doubling down. And also with progress, we think that progress is linear. That, just with the passage of time, things will get better and we'll be a better society, whatever that means. And and that's also not how it works. Like you said, it's almost, it's a pendulum. That's the best. Yeah, that's the best. I couldn't come up with a better analogy. So yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it. And I think that's also when it comes down to us creating change. I think we really need to understand that, because sometimes we think, oh, if we just vote the right way, if we just put the right person in power, if we just do this one thing, if we just get this law passed, everything is reversible. Like everything is reversible. And so we need to constantly be engaged in not just voting for this one issue or voting for this one law or putting this one person in power. It's about creating communities of resistance to continue to push back when the pendulum swings back. And that's always existed. So we, that can sound pessimistic, but I think, and Dr. Cox, I believe, mentioned it in the previous episode that we did with him about critical race theory. Just like systems of oppression have always existed throughout history, systems of resistance have always, and systems, people have always been able to resist. And so we can find hope, some comfort in that, but we need to stay engaged, is my point.
Yeah. What you made me think of is the idea how like they've always have power, and we feel like at points we have the power, but truly what it is the people in power like giving us a false sense of security. And then once we've taken that feeling too far, they will show their power once again. So I feel like there's like the idea of, we talk about this in critical race theory, that like overt racism is now bad, but now there's colorblind racism, and there's all new types of racism that will come about. Like that is us getting a false sense of security, and then us being taken back down again with different forms of power, and them showing their power in different ways. So it's always like, yeah, we got a little bit, but as soon as we take it too far, we're going to be reminded that this wasn't really for us in the first place. It was just to kind of like keep us quiet for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I guess this could be a good time to segue into the rest of our conversation. So speaking back to the fact that we don't want to be too pessimistic in the sense of like, oh, well, there's nothing to be done. Goodbye. End of the podcast. We're going home. So basically what we are here to do in this chapter is to not only explain how we as sociologists think about these issues, but also how we can use sociological theories and knowledge to address these issues. So that's what we're here to do. And there are two main topics or two main concepts that you'll be seeing pop up throughout the series. And we'll be talking about them right now.
Yeah, so the first one I want to talk about is the sociological imagination by the theorist Mills. And basically, the sociological imagination is the understanding that our personal outrage and the circumstances that we are dealing with are related to a bigger social structure. So basically, if you are dealing with personal problems, for example, like racism, then it's because of a larger structural problem of a societal structure. And this can be frustrating to think that, like, oh, what I'm dealing with, I can't get over personally. But also, it can be rewarding the fact that if you know what you're dealing with is due to a larger structure and that other people are facing it, that means this is your time to create a coalition and to talk with other people that are dealing with it and organizing, because you recognize that many people are going through the same thing because we all exist under the same structure.
Yes. And that's like the first thing that we learn in sociology. We've heard it a lot. But actually, this is very important right now, because going back to certain laws that have been put in place to control what's being taught in classrooms, all of that is focusing a lot on individuals. So like how the individuals feel, or blaming almost the individual for systemic issues. And that's not what we do in sociology. Just to clarify, like we are not blaming someone for the entirety of a world history and a whole like white supremacist system, like, or patriarchal system, etc. Like that's not what we're doing. And that's why the sociological imagination is so important, because we need to understand that it's not about what you do. Like you can be the best person, you can be the least prejudiced, least bigoted, most accepting and inclusive person. And your individual behavior won't change the social structure necessarily. Also, even though you're not to blame, like we're not blaming individuals for any systemic issue, we do need to understand that we, all of us, every single one of us as individuals, we are a product of a social structure. So that means me and Halley, like you and me, we are different identities. You know, I'm a woman of color. You're a Jewish white woman. And we have different intersecting identities that make our perspective be different. But still, we both are still within a system that is white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist, etc., that has conditioned us to think in certain ways and act in certain ways. So it's not like I'm better than you or you are better than me for whatever behavior you show. It's we're all being influenced by a social structure, and it's up to us to understand that and how that relationship works to address these issues, if that makes sense.
And we talk about this also in critical race theory, that there's a difference between like not being racist and being anti-racist. So like one of them is that like you personally are not acting prejudiced towards people of color, but being anti-racist means you're also against structures and you are working against the racist structures that exist in society. And so you can be one thing and not the other. You can be both of them, but you have to make sure you understand that there's a difference between them.
Yes, absolutely. So moving on to the second topic, and that is intersectionality and the matrix of domination. So both of those go together, and we have heard all about that before, intersectionality specifically, but the way that we are understanding it, intersectionality is a tool. It's a perspective to see society and social issues as a result of an overlap of oppressive systems, like the ones that we mentioned. So sexism, racism, heterosexism, all of that. And in the mainstream, we hear about intersecting identities and how our intersecting identities makes us different, and that's what intersectionality is. But really, it's deeper than that. It's beyond just those intersecting identities. It's about understanding the overlapping systems of oppression, and that's what we will focus on mostly, the overlapping systems of oppression, which Patricia Hill Collins calls matrix of domination. Yeah.
Yeah. And these theories are helpful to us as sociologists and hopefully to you because it feels like it kind of gives us power back to address the issues that are going on. And so, because of these two theories, we see what's going on in society and the things that are frustrating us, and we put it through these lenses. And what comes out the other side is maybe frustration, but also like a want to push forward, and we see how we can push forward as well. So that's why it's really helpful for us.
Yes. And so that's why we're here. That's basically what this chapter 2 is about. So I know we've kind of gone through a lot in the last, 30 minutes. But so for the last few minutes, we want to talk about just a bit more about the podcast and what we hope this will do regarding these issues that we just talked about. So mainly, we just want to make, one of the things that we want to do is to, again, this podcast is supposed to give sociological knowledge to people and make it accessible and not like what we read in class, which is not accessible at all. So so that's the first thing that we want to do with this chapter.
Mm-hmm. We also wanted to bring more of just like the emotions into it, like just let you guys see like the real parts of what's going on behind the scenes, because as much as we like don't want emotion, we want like objectivity, and whether that actually works or whatever is another discussion. But like also there's like people behind these issues, and we want to make sure that when we're discussing this, we recognize there's structure, but also individual lives. And that means that there's also emotions behind it. And we want to connect with you guys on that level and be more real so that it can be more relatable, understandable. There's more of a connection going on rather than just stating a bunch of theories and then being like, shoo, now you know. Like, we want to make sure you understand that the all-encompassing emotions of being aware of social issues and trying to do something about it.
Yeah, and that is why we're here venting today. Like, we just want, it does feel like it's, the weight is on us, the people that are engaged in these conversations, that we are innately interested in these things. Not everyone can be interested in the same thing. But we are, and sometimes it feels like, because we are the political ones, we're the ones that are involved in this, all the pressure is on us, and everyone expects us to have answers, and that's not how it's supposed to be. Like, we can be the ones to become experts in the issues that people don't want to like get too deep into. Like, we can do that, but also we do need to be collective in the way that we're addressing these issues. Like, we need to go beyond just academics giving us the answers or politicians giving us the answers. Like, that's and again, that's why we're here. Like, we're here to express these emotions that we feel as academics. We're not just brains. We feel the pressure, and we hope that if we provide these tools for an audience that's not part of the university, we can hopefully help create that community that we need as academics beyond academia.
Also, if you are listening to this and you also feel this burden of trying to solve these issues also, and you're becoming overwhelmed with these issues, just know like you're not alone in this, and that there are many other people who want to work alongside you, and that you are not going to be the one solution, and you're not expected to be the one solution, and you don't have to do this by yourself.
The hero.
Right.
There's no heroes here.
Right. We are going to hopefully work together as a community to make things better. So don't feel like the weight lies on your shoulders too.
Yes. So I think with that, we conclude this first episode back with Freedom and Free the People. And so we just want to quickly introduce the next episode and future topics that we'll be talking about throughout the series. So for the next episode, we'll specifically be focusing in on the structure that we keep talking about, the system, all of that. And that will include like conversation about NRA, The Koch brothers, if you've heard of that, and if not, then you'll hear about them. The Christian right, and just the powerful in general. So we'll just be getting more into the structure that underlies these issues that we discussed today.
Mm-hmm. And I'm personally very excited for that episode, so make sure you tune into that, because I think it will be very enlightening, and we're going to be pulling back the layers to find out where this power lies and who holds it, which I think will be very fun. And then in future episodes, we're going to be talking about the outrage that is created. So that's through the media, this idea of us versus them, the polarization and conflict that goes online, and through just like how politics has worked recently. And then we're also going to be looking at the idea of transforming our outrage into love and activism. So make sure you tune into those, because it'll be very fun and exciting.
Yes. So I guess we will see you in a couple of weeks with episode 2. Bye.
We'd also like to thank the University of Central Florida Department of Sociology for their generous support of this podcast.